Public engagement, including communicating our research findings to the public, and also promoting debates around topical issues, is an important skill set for academics. But the question is, how do we do this successfully? To get answers to this, we're honored to have Michael Parker, the commission editor of The Conversation, here today. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation, and welcome to Research Live.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'd like to tee off with actually a basic question. Why do we need to reach out to the public as academics?
So the research sector is really enormous in this country and many other countries as well. It's a key economic driver, but it's also an enormous repository of knowledge, of skills and expertise. And the way the peer-reviewed journal system works is that the vast majority of that knowledge is funneled into a peer-reviewed journal or journals, which are read by your academic peers and go on to inform other research and so forth. But very little of that ever reaches down to the general public. And that means there is a great loss to of information to your average reader who is never kept apprised of what is going on in the research sector, new developments, new findings, and that essentially has a corrosive effect on the quality of public debate and the general informed nature of the public. So I think it's very important that researchers are much more aware of not just the research that they're doing, but finding a way to tell people about it. And in fact, the government sees that the same way, because you know, the REF has ensured that public communication of research is an integral part of the way academics are now adjudicated and judged upon.
In your opinion, how could the early career researchers could achieve successfully this?
So I sometimes feel that early career researchers are perhaps best placed to do this. They're younger, they are perhaps less busy, they have more time, and they're more familiar with the sheer range of media that is now available to us. 20 years ago, when the professors of today were the PhDs of then, there was no social media, there was no internet, well, only just anyway. Certainly, you know, the ground has changed enormously, and those academics and indeed people of any profession that are very much 20 years deep into their specific niche may not have time or interest or inclination to go about looking into all the options. So early career researchers are just simply younger and more familiar with the media and the communications world that we now live in. And so they're better placed to take the baton and have a go at it, which is not to say that you know, professors and more senior lecturers, senior academics, it's not to say that they don't, but sometimes their priorities are different. So, I mean, your question was, how should they go about doing it? I mean, get involved with the conversation, that's what I'd say, but then I would say that.
Well, so you mentioned this type of new, let's say, new media, and well, the conversation is going to be one of them. What other activities are there to support these early career researchers? What are, I mean, you'd be much more, if you be more precise in a way, and tell us what you think are the facilities out there for engaging with the public.
So there are, I guess, to start with social media. So Twitter and Facebook. Twitter especially is almost like a news feed of its own cause. So it's very easy to sign up for a Twitter account yourself, and then to join groups and you know, follow like-minded individuals and Twitter accounts who you know, retweet work you're interested in, and follow people whose work you're interested in. And they in turn will likely follow you. And you can create a conversation online, and creating a discussion around new results, and just creating that kind of public forum where, because the nature of Twitter is that it's public, that kind of conversation can go on in public and people can join in and learn from it and find sources of information they may not have previously discovered and go on and learn from those and so on and so forth. So I think that's very important. Facebook too, you know, although Facebook by its nature is generally closed, but not necessarily. And then you have, of course, blogs and websites and so forth. I mean, a lot of the big publishing groups also have their own sort of blogs or junior forums, I suppose you could call them. I think Nature, for example, there's Scilogs and there's Nature blogs. And anyone can go online and in 25 minutes have their own blog up and running on which they can opine on any subject at great length. So it's important to think about what you want to get out of public engagement with the media, and perhaps take the route that's best suited for you. There is an endless series of publications who are always keen to hear from people who have got interesting things to say, who have got expertise and a background with which to come up with interesting things to say, and who have got the wherewithal to put pen to paper and say it. And so you just have to approach these organisations, these websites, news publications, and pitch your ideas. And that I can imagine that can come as a bit of a surprise, perhaps, to people who are academic by nature or researchers, and now they're being asked to be journalists, or at least to find a way to publicly communicate that research. But that's part and parcel of it, and you can't make an omelette without breaking an egg.
Okay. Now let's talk about one such facility, which is The Conversation. What is it about?
The idea of The Conversation is that it's a news website like any other. It carries news stories, pieces of analysis and comment and opinion. But unlike any other newspaper, it is entirely written by academics. So all the authors of all the pieces on The Conversation are academics and researchers. And the idea is that us, a team of journalists, about 20 of us here in the UK, we commission stories based on their news value, interest value, just as we would do if we were a newsroom at a newspaper or magazine or broadcaster. But then instead of writing them ourselves, often by interviewing you, experts, we instead ask you, experts, to write it for us. And then we will edit, and between us, it'll be a sort of cooperative venture whereby you bring the facts and argument and the expertise, and us journalists can help polish that piece up and edit it and make sure that it's easily understandable for a general audience, so that your research, your understanding of the world, your expertise can find as broad a readership as possible, informing as broad a number of people as possible, and ultimately improving the quality of public debate worldwide.
So, Michael, what makes The Conversation different from other web news?
Other than the fact that it's written entirely by academics, of course, which is our selling point, our unique selling point. We're very aware that some academics have in the past perhaps been in touch with the media, perhaps they've been interviewed, perhaps they've put forward their research and tried to get it covered. And obviously the vast majority of my industry are fine, upstanding men and women and journalists, but sometimes people get on the wrong side of the media, or they feel wronged by the media, and they may feel like the whole dealing with the press is just a bad idea they should not bother with. And that's very unfortunate, So we're very conscious of that, and we want to make The Conversation the most sort of supportive, friendly way that people who are perhaps not used to dealing with the media can get used to doing so. And the way we do that is by firstly having one of us journalists there to help guide you through the process, to edit your work so it looks as good as possible, is as comprehensible as possible, reaches as wide an audience as possible. But also, crucially, all the authors have to sign off their work. So we have a content management system in which we both work. It's very straightforward, like a word processor really, but online. And in order for us to publish, the system absolutely requires the author to push a button marked approve. And if for whatever reason the author feels uncomfortable with the way the piece is shaping up, by withholding that approval, we simply can't publish it. So the ball is really in your court. And this is part of how we're trying to say, look, you come to us, it may be a new, strange world that you're dipping your toe in, but if you come via the conversation, we can make it as easy as possible. And that way we hope that, you know, people will never find that the words they thought they were saying are coming out in any other way other than you know, the ones they saw and approved. And you know, that kind of approach seems to have worked. We've done very well in terms of, I think something like 7,000 authors from UK alone since 2013, and more in the region of 30,000 worldwide. So there's a conversation in Australia, in the US, in Africa, Johannesburg, and Paris, France. So combined, about 30,000 authors from 1,500 universities. So obviously it's an idea that people seem to have got behind.
And they're from different stages of the research
Yeah,
life.
absolutely.
PhD students, do you
Yeah.
have a lot of PhD students?
From PhD students and postdocs to lecturers and professors. It's for everyone. Anyone who would like to, who has something to say.
What is the feedback actually you've received from the readers? So looking at the other side, what are the data you gathered from the readers?
So right from the outset, our idea was always to try and reach as many readers as possible. So whereas a peer-reviewed journal may ask academics to write for them for free and then keep the work to themselves and charge people £30 an article, the conversation is all about informing people. And in order to do that, the content is always free, and the content is published under Creative Commons licenses. So that means it's free to republish. So other republishers, mainstream news organisations like The Guardian and The Independent and the BBC, Wall Street Journal, Scientific American, you know, and all sorts of web sites that you may or may not have heard of, they take our copy and they republish it. And that way we can track where your copy has been republished and how many times it's been read. And at the same time, we're spreading your information and your understanding of complex subjects far, far wider than we could ever hope to reach just on our site. And the result of that is that we have lots and lots of comments from people on our site. And where they are republished, of course, they generate comments as well from the readers. So in the UK alone, we just had a record-breaking month this month in December, in January, sorry, 13 million reads, including all our republishing off-site and on our site as well. Somewhere in the region of 900,000 to 1 million reads on site, and yeah, you know, obviously we're managing to reach a lot of people. And hopefully they are taking a lot from our experts, from you and the expertise that you put in. In fact, Tara Marshall is a psychology lecturer from Brunel. She just had a piece in about Instagram and narcissistic selfie posting, which got 250,000 reads over the course of the weekend. So there's an enormous appetite out there for you know, every conceivable area of research under the sun.
Can the readers, they can make a comment? Could they give an idea of the next topic or dig a bit more on the topic and give you more further idea of what else to look or another idea of the topic?
So it's interesting. My colleague a year or so ago commissioned a chap from Leeds who's he'd written a paper about smart cities, this sort of buzzword of the smart city. It's a bit nebulous. It's not really very clear what the smart city is supposed to be outside of this sort of fantasy land of a city that runs itself through communication and IT channels, wireless on every street corner. It's all very vague. And he wrote a piece saying, you know, what do we really want smart cities to be? People talk about them, but there are so few details. Has anyone really stopped to ask people what they want their future city to look like, how they want it to run? And this was picked up by The Guardian, and it was put up in a very prominent place in The Guardian. Got around 50,000 reads, I think. But what was more interesting was that on The Guardian, there was a huge stream of comments underneath, many hundreds of comments, in which people discussed what they wanted from a smart city. And this was great. So the chap from Leeds, the author, asked one of his postdocs to go in and copy-paste all those comments out. And they became an input back into his research. I asked the question, what do people want from a smart city? And the public answered. And so now I will study what those people want. And in that way, you know, we're not, obviously by writing for the press, you are doing that thing where you're gaining public exposure and you're having a media profile, and that is an inevitable part of it, and it brings its own benefits. But also, you're not just reaching the press, you're reaching other academics, and you're reaching people, you know, who can answer your questions. You're reaching your raw material, the great public, with whom you will be, you know, investigating and studying and asking to be part of your experiments. There, I call them that. And so, yeah, it's important to realise that our academics, our authors, have had as many invitations from other academics asking them to collaborate, or asking them to work on things, or asking them to come to conferences, to give presentations. We've had researchers asked to go to Parliament to present to select committees for evidence for bills, legislation. So by putting yourself above the parapet and making yourself visible, a great number of doors open, and they are professional, and they are personal, and they are media-based, and you know there is a lot to gain, and we hope that our authors will take the plunge.
So let's imagine that people are watching this and they're getting really enthusiastic about conversation. If I were watching the video, which I hope that they're thinking the same as me, if I want to get involved, how could I get involved?
So the conversation is open to anyone. Anyone can write for the conversation so long as they have a current academic or research institute position. So it doesn't matter whether you're a PhD student, which is our bare minimum requirement, or if you're a university academic or researcher, as long as you have, whether that's full-time, part-time, emeritus, honorary, visiting, as long as you have some kind of association with a current UK public research institute, we want to hear from you. And you can go to the website, that's theconversation.com, and there's a button there where you can click to pitch an idea, and if you type in the idea you have, keep it quite brief, sort of 100, 150 words, giving an outline of what you want to say, why it's relevant now and not 6 weeks ago or 6 months down the line. And just try and give us an impression of why it's important and why you think you're a good person to write that piece. And then one of our journalists will get back to you within a day or so, probably sooner, and we'll be able to take that piece on from there. Not every idea is suitable for the general public, but we will always try to give advice about how you can improve things if so.
What's happening in the case that you have more than one idea, 10, 20, or you can try more?
We have many ideas. Yeah. No,
Okay.
we get dozens of pitches every week. So the conversation is like any other news website. We cover everything. We have arts and culture, we have health and sciences and technology and business, and an education column as well. So we try and cover all bases. So there's something there for everyone. The idea is that by combining the best of academic expertise and understanding of a subject with our journalistic understanding of when is a good time to run a story, when are people talking about it, when can you get the most impact from it, and the kind of questions that need to be asked. You know, when you read a newspaper, when you listen to the news in the evening, you'll hear what they tell you, but you'll also wonder, like, there'll be other questions that you don't have answered. There'll be questions you don't even know that you needed to ask. That's the nature of the news. It's small, it's bite-sized, it tends to be quite generalist. Experts, on the other hand, academics, are utterly niche. They're very quite narrow-focused and spend a lot of time, many years or decades, focusing on quite small areas, so they become very expert. And that's what we want to kind of tap into, and fill in all the gaps, answer those questions that aren't being answered.
So you touched upon it earlier briefly. What is the difference that in our writing that we should use between writing an academic paper and actually writing for the conversation, for instance? What do you see normally an academic style and what it should actually be?
Well, I suppose the classic thing I see is that a journalist will always write the most important things first, whereas an academic tends to write the things that happened first, chronologically speaking. And so what I tend to do is look down to the bottom 2 paragraphs of the piece and pick out the point that the piece was about and put it back at the top. I mean, it's what we call the inverted news pyramid. The first thing they teach you in journalism school is a headline should be, a short, pithy way of summing up the entire piece, so that if you never read the piece, you'd at least get an understanding of what it was about based on the headline. The opening sentence or paragraph is the same thing with a bit more detail, and so on and so forth. And you expand, giving a few more details each time, so that if someone only read half the piece, they could still go away understanding the main point of it without getting maybe all the details. If you start at the beginning and then only work your way forward through time, giving all this contextual background information before getting to the point right at the bottom, you've already lost your readers. They've gone because they thought they were reading a textbook and not a news story. So it's important to start with the most important elements of your story first, and then flesh out the context and background later. So that's a very important part, really. And you just have to, what I like to say is, if you're going to write for the general public, you have to remember how the general public are, and that means you, when you're not in academic mode, So you should write a piece in the same way that you would explain something to your friends in the pub. If I don't know whether you go to the pub and use extremely long passive constructions and pepper your conversation with semicolons. Maybe you do. But it's best to adopt a straightforward approach, Don't call a spade a mobile, handheld, earth-moving implement when you can call it a spade. It's, no one is impressed by big words. No one is impressed by formal language, overly formal language. You hold your readers by having something to say and saying it clearly so they can understand it. Otherwise, why would they read? Yeah, the conversation is not an opportunity for, journalists are very guilty of it as well. And we always say, when you're writing for your readers, not for other journalists. An opportunity to write is not an opportunity to show off to other journalists about what a great journalist you are. That will come if what you're writing is indeed good. The fact that you are a great journalist will come naturally from that. Likewise, writing for the public is not an opportunity to show off what a fine use of academic terms you have, or using the Harvard citation style without reference to a textbook. It's important to be straightforward and easy to understand, because if people don't understand it, they won't read it, and if people don't read it, what's the point?
Now, any advice on how we can, guard against potential risks in trying to reach out to the public?
Potential risks?
Yeah.
Well, I don't think there are any risks over and above being, backing up what you're saying with evidence.
Okay.
So the conversation is not a peer-reviewed journal. So we don't expect, and indeed you won't find that we're not experts in your fields of expertise. We won't be able to cross-reference some claim you are making with a report from years ago, and that's not what we're about. We expect a certain degree of rigour and familiarity with the topic that you're writing on. Otherwise, why would we come to you? But at the same time, we would expect that you reference your pieces, not in a footnote citation style, but in the style of articles you read on the internet. So with hyperlinks throughout. If we make a claim, back it up. Could be a link to a paper, or an abstract, or a report in a newspaper, or a published study from government or NGO. But the point is, you don't need to cite every single idea in the piece, but you do have to back up claims you're making. And this is not just to demonstrate that you're not pulling these things out of your hat, but it's also to give our readers something else to get their teeth into. If you're brushing quickly over a larger, complex topic, put some links in there. If they're interested, they can go off-site and get the full complex details if they wish. Hyperlinks are the bedrock of the internet, of the web. Without hyperlinks, the web is just a collection of unlinked pages. So, it offers this wonderful resource. Use it.
Okay. Thank you very much, Michael, for taking time off your busy schedule to talk to us today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.